Hey, family. Welcome to We All Need Each Other, the podcast from Transformation Ministries.
Hi, everyone. We're here with another episode of We All Need Each Other, and super excited today because we have not only one, but two amazing guests. We have Kristy Mikel and Kate Berkey, who most of us go way back with from ministry days and different connections. But they have also just written a book together. The book is called A Place Called Braverly, right here. How does that make you guys feel to see that on a screen? Amazing.
That's amazing. I feel like we also need to hold up our copies.
It's so fun. It's amazing to know, like, just, you guys are incredible people, but you're also normal people. And to know that normal people can write a book and have it be so good. It's encouraging to me because someday I'd like to write a book. But I would love it if you guys would go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll just get into the conversation.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Kristy. I'm the one who still lives in Thailand, and I'm here on a short home visit.
And I'm Kate. I actually live on the north side of Chicago and work with a really small ministry called Devon Oasis Ministry with refugees and immigrants. So never a dull moment here in Chicago.
That's awesome. And how did you guys meet or become friends? Do you go way back, or how do you know each other?
When I was a freshman in high school, Kristy was working in student ministries at Napanee Missionary Church, where I was attending, grew up in. And just as a freshman, Kristy took me under her wing and was my mentor, actually. So that was in 2008. So we go back a little bit. But it's really cool. Our story is one of moving from mentor and mentee discipling relationship to becoming just friends and sisters. And we lived in Thailand together and worked on this book and wrote a book together. And if you would have told little freshman Kate that, or maybe Kristy was working with freshman Kate at the time, she probably been wow, that's cool. So we go a little bit back, but a strange story, but a really cool, just God weaving our stories together in a pretty incredible way.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. Yeah, it's one of those things where if God told us things that was 10 years in the future, we would not believe him.
Totally.
He's always up to those things. So awesome. So your book is called A Place Called Braverly. So can you explain this place? What is Braverly to someone who has never heard of that before?
Yeah. So, Braverly is a real place in Mae Sot, Thailand, along the Thai-Burma border. In its simplest form, it's a training center. It's a cafe and a sewing center that was set out to empower women, essentially. And so it provides a space that's fair employment, a safe environment for them to work. But bigger than that, it's a place that was created to help women step into their dreams. We always share women in that culture, as we would sit in their homes and visit with them before Braverly was really taking off. They had so many dreams for their children, but so few dreams for themselves. And so it was really birthed from this place of no, but your dreams matter to the Lord too. And we want to create space for you to step into whatever those are. And out of those conversations came women who wanted to learn baking, to be a barista, to be a seamstress. And so that's kind of where it came from, of how can we create a space that helps them provide for their families, but it's what they want to do. So that's what it is. And beyond all of that, it's a community of women to do life together, to just come alongside each other and to figure out what this looks like, to follow after Jesus and to just be women of courage.
That's cool. In their introduction, you shared about how there was a person, Kayla, who went on ahead, and she was the first one to be in Thailand. Is that right?
Yeah.
What year did she go over?
So she first went over in 2013 with a small team that was entrepreneurial. I can't say that word right. Anyway, went over there to kind of see what are the needs here beyond just ministry, what are practical needs to fulfill for people and help provide space for people to provide for themselves. And so out of that, she actually started, it was called Famous Ray's Bicycle Shop at the time. And it was focused more on the men in the community, young boys. fixing bicycles, renting bicycles out. And then the Lord gave her like a very specific dream in January of 2016. So fast forward a few years, and felt like she was really supposed to shift her focus to the women, because there was a restaurant that they were working with as well that was also empowering the men. She was like, what about the women? And so that's kind of when the idea of Braverly started. And then we opened our doors to it in November of 2016. So
wow. And you went over in 2016.
I did, in August 2016.
Okay. And then Kate, you joined how many years after that? Was it?
I joined 2 years later, basically, because it's August 2018.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. That is so, so cool. And then you have a phrase that you say a lot, and you said it's painted all over, and it is the live brave, dream braverly, and influence bravery. So what does that phrase mean to you? Why did you choose that phrase? What kind of, what would that mean to you in a nutshell?
Yeah. So, I mean, on the very technical level of Braverly itself, I think there's a bigger story there. But I think, cause like just the way that Kayla designed that phrase, because it's not actually grammatically correct, which is what every editor in the world wanted to tell us. We get it. It's not grammatically correct. But the whole idea of it is, just in our everyday lives, are we choosing courage over fear? And not just in these like big grand ways, yes, obviously, but like even in just the little ways in our life, like, are we choosing courage in our everyday life? Like, are we dreaming for the future in ways that step beyond that threshold of fear that so often holds us back? And then like, is our decisions and our actions, is that inspiring courage in others, or is that like spreading fear in places? Because we can do both. We can either like spread fear just and worry and anxiety, or we can try our hardest to like spread courage and bravery and hope and love. And so that's so much of the idea, at least to us, of live brave, dream bravely, and influence bravery. And it truly just came from Braverly itself. Yeah, it's like painted on the back wall of the cafe. I love that. I miss it. It's been so long since I've been there. But it truly like also motivates so much of what's done at Braverly, which is pretty incredible.
That's really, really cool. Very cool.
So
Nick, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, already it's pretty clear that the words brave and courage are pretty key to this story. I just be interested, like, why do you think these kind of themes have resonated so much with the people you've been serving? Like, what are you pulling out from those themes? Why are they so important to you guys?
Yeah, I think it's something that goes beyond just the people that we're serving. First of all, like, I think there was something deep inside of each of us that it resonated in first, of like, fear has just been such a theme in our lives. And I hate to look back and think of how many times fear has stopped me from stepping into a place, because I lose count of how many times that's happened. And so like, it came from, I think for each of us, this internal space of like, man, we just do not want to be people who give in to fear. And then to step into a place along a border in Thailand and Burma, where one, there's war happening there. So that's a pretty legitimate fear in people's lives. And just, it's a different kind of life. It's different things that you're coming up against. And fear is just kind of bred in those spaces. And so you just see that. And again, sitting in the homes of these women and hearing them share dreams for their children, but like this fear at the root of like, I think I'm past the time of actually being able to step into my dream. Like, it would be too hard, it would be too impossible. And so it really comes from that place too, of like, no, like, I don't want that to be the case in my life. I don't want you to have to live in that space either. And so it like created this deeper thing in us of like, how do we speak to fear and like choosing courage over that? And that's why these things have become so important.
Yeah. I think what's really cool as well, like just as you were sharing that, like, I think there's a lot of times in like missions and ministry where you come and you're like, I'm going to teach you everything I know. Like, I'm gonna save you. You're welcome. And like, that's not like by any means, like that's not the right heart and attitude. But I think like what is really cool about just like the work that like we get to do at Braverly, that I get to do in this neighborhood in Chicago, is like, I'm going on that same journey of like courage and bravery and like, man, let's borrow and share courage together. Like, let's figure this out together, because I think our families are going to be better for it. I think our community is going to be better for it, in our world, like as a whole, if we can learn this thing together, because both of our lives like deserve that. Like we need to embrace that in our lives, like to step past fear. So that's something I just love about like the whole mission of Braverly. It's really a journey together to figure it out, to spur each other along in that.
See, you just answered my question of the We All Need Each Other podcast.
Right.
That's a main theme for us. So good job. Go ahead, Aaron.
Well, it's just such a great point, because you're right. I feel like so often when we talk about missions, it is like, I'm bringing something to you, right? And even if people don't, if they say, oh, well, yeah, I'm learning something from this interaction, it's almost done in like a passive aggressive way, right? Of like, oh, well, I'm obviously in a higher standing than you, but look, I'm still learning something. And I don't get that at all from the stories you guys are telling. It's you are so immersed and really actively looking for ways to kind of grow from the people you're serving. I guess how do you cultivate that? Because again, I feel like we have a similar background in growing up in this kind of Midwestern, conservative style area. That's just not the norm. I feel like. What did you do to kind of cultivate that idea?
Man, that's a great question. I'd love to tell you. I think for me, it's just been such like a journey for me, honestly, to like break down some of those barriers. Because if I'm going to be honest, like I didn't always have the heart in ministry, and that like in that perspective going into missions. Like I wish I could say that I was always like, yeah, I'm teachable, I'm humble, like I'm here to truly like learn from you, but that's not the case. So I think it's been like a really big journey for me. I think there's like two things that came to mind immediately. One was like, I think for me, like cultivating a sense of like the person I'm standing across from has so much dignity, and like their value is just like way up here, like just seeing like the image of God in others, and just the human dignity in the people that I'm across from. Like, I think that immediately reframes my mind, right, to see people in a different light, in a different way. And like even so the neighborhood that I work in here in Chicago, working with a lot of refugees and immigrants, and something as simple as like just somebody's like English level is really low, and I have to remind myself like, man, that is like an intelligent person though. Like, even though their English level is low, like I just have to see the dignity in people and remember like they are still a very intelligent person, very like they brought their family to America, so they know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like things like that. We're just remembering that, but also like that takes a lot of humility to even just like admit that, because I'm like crawling in my skin admitting these kinds of things, even right here, because these are like the said things where you're just like, I have to like be honest enough to admit that like I had a thought that was like, hey, I'm like above you for just a minute. Because that's not what I want to be. That's growth. Like, I don't like that at all. But I think one to like just have that humility to just say like, man, like you have so much worth and dignity and value. And like, we're here, or in some levels, like I'm here, like you are here. Like, I think that's been a journey though for me. And
yeah, I feel like you said that really well. It really is like truly seeing the person across from you and seeing them like in a full way that you would want them to see you too, and like when you get down to it, like while our backgrounds may be vastly different, our experiences really aren't that different, and like things that we've come up against, questions that we've wrestled with, and to be able to come to a place where we can just see each other in that way, I think helps cultivate it all the more.
I just wanted to pause right here and say thank you. Thank you for joining us and being here with us on the We All Need Each Other podcast. If you want to support us, please don't hesitate to stop by our website, www.transformation58.com/give. Thanks. We all need each other.
Let's talk a little bit specifically about the book. I've got so many questions I want to ask just about, because like I said before, I would love to write a book someday, but so I want to just be like, what's it like to write a book?
Yeah.
But that's pretty general. But one thing, so I went to the launch team party, which I'm so glad I did. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But just hearing you guys talk about how difficult it was, how scary it was, how vulnerable it feels, to me, it's not like a coincidence that your book is about bravery and courage, and you went through all of this fear and self-conscious thoughts and doubt during the process of writing the book. So just talk about that connection a little bit.
You should write a book. It's so fun. No, it is. I mean, if that's what if I think for us, so the Lord gave us an idea of something that's really about as specific as we felt like he was in that moment. And so I moved to Thailand. My parents thought I was crazy because I quit my full-time job and I moved for something, and we didn't have any idea where that something was going to lead. And so for us, I remember moving to Thailand, and my team just gave me the freedom. And this feels like a huge privilege, especially now being back in the States and working and doing ministry and stuff. But they gave me the freedom to just have the process unfold, let the Lord take Kristy and I on a journey to figure out what the book was going to be about, what he wanted to say, and how it was going to look. So truly, I feel a lot of my time, our time together in Thailand was just uncovering what the Lord wanted the book to be about. One story we shared at the launch team party was, I was supposed to move back to the States in 2 months, and we were on a writing retreat together. And it was really a time where we were supposed to finalize stuff for the book. It was pretty much written. And I got to the writing retreat, and Kristy and I were sitting across from each other. And I remember saying I don't think this is it. I think we need to scrap it. And she was like, actually, I agree. So we scrapped it. We scrapped pretty much the whole book and started over, because we were this isn't the direction God wants for the book. I think he's saying something different. I think he wants the book to unfold differently. But literally, once we got that nailed down, we wrote the book in a month and a half. Wow. And then we spent the rest of the time editing it. But it took a long time for us. It took a long time to just uncover what the Lord even wanted to say.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy. And it is a lot of vulnerability. It's a lot of just the style that we wrote it in is more personal and storytelling. And so there was moments where I would be having a meltdown of just I can't do this, Kristy. And then there'd be moments where she would, and we would help pull each other up in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. That sums up the experience really well, of just, it brought you to the most vulnerable part of yourself. And then was now put some of that in this book too, And so, but it was just so much the Lord just led the experience. We can't emphasize that enough, because it definitely wasn't, it changed from what we thought it would be when we first started to where we ended up.
Yeah.
So
now, do you think it would have been different if it's so cool you wrote it together? Mm-hmm. I wonder what that journey would have looked like if it was separate, but that's cool that you had each other to collab on it and hold each other up when things were hard. But wow, I did not know that it scrapped. I mean, you can tell it's Holy Spirit filled. It makes sense that it just came quickly, because it was, and I read it so quickly. I read it fast because it was storytelling, and it was so, I love how you took, in each chapter, you had a Bible story that went along with your personal story that really uncovered something for the reader that, it's whether it's surrender, or whether it's, he calls me a daughter, or whether it's even, I love chapter 4. Dan, I know you chapter 4 is just about us as women, and, you take the Mary and Martha. And I've always read that passage and thought, oh, this is about busyness. And we're not supposed to be busy. And, I'm supposed to sit at Jesus' feet and do my time alone with God. Mm-hmm. And the way that you uncovered that, and it's no, actually, Jesus is dignifying this part that he's saying, hey, I'm not going to take this privilege from you. You're a woman in this community that is not, they're looked down upon, or they're not given these things. It was I feel I had all those brain explosion emojis going on.
100%.
So good. So I loved that. And Dan, I know you liked chapter 4 as well.
Yeah, I would love to hear if we just talked about chapter 4, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
And part of that is because just lately I feel like I've been kind of, it's just come to the forefront a lot for me personally. And you see a lot of stuff, just, social media and things like that about women in the church and leadership and preaching and all these things. And I know for you, Kate, you talked about at the party about how this is the chapter that people are either going to love it or they're going to hate it. And that's another reason to feel vulnerable, because like that could be the part where someone is like, nope, I'm done, and puts the book away.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it had the opposite effect. I was like, yes, like I love this so much. And I'm so thankful that you said it, but just maybe like, talk about that topic a little bit more and how you've come to the place where you're at. You too, Kristy.
It's been a journey for both of us, I think, it's like, I grew up in the church and now like I've been thinking about it. Every job I've had post college and even in college was ministry. So I've been in ministry for longer than it probably looks, because I'm not that old, but like I like this has been so much of my world is in ministry, and like it's been hard, and it's been hard to like reconcile like what do I do with like a gender that I can't control, and like that I was like, this is who I am. Like God has given me so many like gifts and abilities. Like, where do I fit in all of this? That's been a huge like journey and battle for me. Some seasons I handle it better and some not so much. But truly, like for me, I've learned from under a lot of really good teachers, I think, on this. So like, man, just even that chapter was so informed by some like other really amazing pastors like Chris Volatin and Sarah Bessie and some other teachers who I'm like, I have a lot of respect and a lot of like hold them in high regard. So first I want to say that highly informed by them. So if you don't like that chapter, it's also very informed by them. You probably don't like them. But yeah, I think like, man, that chapter, like it does hold, I think it holds a lot of truths. I know that there's a lot of people and like potentially even like family of mine and like maybe even supporters of mine who won't agree with it. But I think like the beauty of that chapter that I see, and Kristy and I have talked about this quite a bit, is like that story of Mary and Martha. I also had only heard it like, don't be busy, like spend time with Jesus. And that's so true. Like we need that now more than ever, right? Like our world is crazy. But I think what I love about that story in the perspective of like Jesus creating this space for Mary at his feet in a room where she wasn't supposed to be. She wasn't supposed to be like learning from like men in that room. She was supposed to be up and working. What I love about that story as well is that that Jesus made space for both Mary and Martha to be there. That it wasn't like Mary, he didn't say to Mary, like, go help Martha. But he also didn't tell Martha, like, sit down. Like he did encourage her, like, hey, this is the most important place to be. But he didn't say like, come on, Martha, like sit down. Like Martha was also serving in a different way. And in that moment, yeah, like Mary, that was a privilege and he wasn't going to take it away. But he created space for both of those women to be there. And I think what I struggle with in a lot of our like conversations about women in ministry and women in our world in general is it's like, you can either be that or you can be that, but there's no room for like both of you to be there. And I just think that's a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that like Jesus created space for both. And one was super countercultural, but he didn't like discredit the other woman in the room who's like, I'm here, I want to serve. I'm all about hospitality. Like she filled a more traditional role and that was fine. But he also like made that space for a woman who was just craving to be with Jesus and to learn from him. And I feel like in my own life, that's where my attention is coming, where I'm just craving to like use the gifts God has given me, but can I in these spaces? I don't know. So that's where a lot of like the heart behind it came from, was trying to create a space where both women could exist and both women were so loved by Jesus and had space with Jesus.
Yeah. And I just felt like, I mean, of course I'm biased, you're my friend and I just love how you write, but like it always felt risky, but it was never intended to be like this call to arms, of like, we're going to do battle, but just like this reality of, like, this is the heart of who we believe Jesus to be. And like, it's a Jesus who does make space for everybody and who does like, just acknowledge that like, there's space for you to take up. And if this is where you want to be, and this is where I've called you to be there, and there's something really beautiful in that. Like, it's certainly not meant to be divisive in any way. Yeah, it's a beautiful picture of the heart of the Father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to apologize for the chapter, honestly.
No.
You should.
Like, I'm not going to like go to fight with people on it, because that's not the point.
Yeah.
But I'm also, that for us, like, speaking of like the process of writing and editing, like this conversation is bringing to mind that like that chapter more than any others, like we would read it to edit it together or like separately and come back together. And as we were editing and that one more times than not, we were like, I don't know what to change. I think that this is good. Like there were moments where we changed some things and really just leaned into the Lord of like, is there anything that we got wrong here? And I'm sure there's things we got wrong. Don't hear me saying that's not perfect. But it was just interesting. Like there was a lot of chapters that we struggled through and just, it felt like a fight to get the words down and then to edit the words. But that one was like, okay, well, chapter 4 is good. All right, move on to the next one. So I don't know what to say about that, but that was just crazy in the process.
Yeah. I want to say something, and then Aaron or Allie, you guys can jump back in with some questions. But so the book, I didn't know what to expect when I read the book. I didn't know if it was going to be a story about the place Braverly or what it was. It's not that, not explicitly that. But it's also written directly to women. Your audience is women. And so there were a few times where I'm like, this is not for me, but I never felt like, well, I shouldn't be reading this, or I can't learn from this. In fact, like, I was just like, I'm so thankful for this perspective, for you speaking to women about their role in the kingdom, was huge for me, a huge learning piece for me. And then as I thought about you guys, obviously, Kate, you're younger, so I didn't know. I mean, I knew you, but I didn't know you as more of a contemporary. But Kristy, like, we've been on trips together. We did youth group stuff together, camps together. And I've always seen you as someone who is just such a gifted leader, and has so much wisdom to share. And I mean, I grew up with some of the same ideas too about women in ministry, but knowing you and others like you has made me and you too, Allie, has made me just like throw all that out the window in a lot of ways, because it's foolish to think that someone who clearly communes with God the way you do can't teach me something. So I'm just thankful for you guys and using your voice and being brave to write that, even though it's risky.
Yeah. I was going to say, how did that, because I know, being over in Thailand and like the culture there, obviously women it's probably a lot harder than it is in America. So as you're doing that on the daily, you're trying to uplift women. Do you face opposition, like, because it's more cultural over there? Like, are they happy that you're elevating women? Are people upset that like how does that cultural thing work itself out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes and no. So, I mean, there's moments where we come up against it maybe a little more, but for the most part, because of the space that we've created, like, we're really interacting a lot with just the women. We interact with their families. We see like their families, but we're interacting so much with the women. So it's easy to get caught kind of in that space of like, this is really easy to empower them, like for us to say things to empower them. Now, seeing them live it out is maybe a different story, because it does challenge thinking. It does challenge like what they've been brought up, like opportunities and all of that. It challenges that. And it gives us a different like awareness and just appreciation for culturally where we're at. Yeah, I don't know how to answer this question well, other than to say like it helps give us that perspective. I don't feel like we find ourselves like beating our head against a wall a lot. Right. But it presents challenges in moments for the most part. it feels like, because we're a foreigner there too, like we have a lot of freedom to speak into some things that maybe we wouldn't be given the opportunity to speak into. And as to how well they always go over, I can't say that I necessarily know always how that goes in the home later. But it's brought about some really good conversations, and I'm thankful for those. Like, it's opened a lot of doors to dialogue more than maybe we would have been able to before.
Yeah. And I think too, like, even just that last point where like, I think that the women, just through like the conversations that have started, and like just the different way that Braverly tries to empower women for truly the goal of uplifting an entire family. I think that you could speak into this more, but just there's like some women at Braverly who have just grown, like skyrocketed in their confidence and in their abilities. Like people that are leaders now who came in much more timid, and some of that's personality and growing, right? But I think that some of that is also being given those opportunities and encouraged in those opportunities.
Yeah. And to see, that they're capable of that. And I think it has been beautiful to watch, like, to the bit that we've gotten to see it, their families recognize how empowered the wife, the mom now is, and like how much more confidently she can help lead in the home as well. And like really instill those things into her children, which are important. Like, people want their kids to be courageous. And so it's been beautiful to watch that, like, as they've taken up space and like kind of come to this place of like, okay, I want to step in courage and not in fear. Like, it affects the whole family.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, and I think, again, we're talking about these themes of bravery and courage. Like you both have clearly lived that. I mean, I think as someone who really values the written word, getting to a point where you completely scrap an entire book that you've written, to me is like I don't know what gets more courageous than that. That would be incredibly daunting to me. So I feel like as I was reading this book, it's like the fact that you both are living that out is probably, I would think, a way that you connect so much deeper with, the women that you're serving. But I want to stick on this question that Allie's asking, because as I was reading, I went back in my head a couple times to Kate, something you wrote in chapter 1, where you said women, no matter their age, have to ask their father or husband for permission and advice on nearly every area of life. I mean, I would just wonder, as two women coming into that type of cultural framework, I mean, again, not that we've already talked about here in America, we have our own issues with gender and kind of how we think about that. But I mean, it seems like that would present a difficulty for you both. I mean, what was that like, I guess?
I think so. That's a really interesting, cultural thing to step into for me. I mean, like, as Kristy said a little while ago, like, as foreigners, we weren't really expected to fall in line with that. So, so in a way it was like, I could have some distance from that, because I was like, well, I don't have to do that. So like, it's just, you have that distance, right? But, I think for me, like on the inside, as I was processing that, I was like, no, this is awful. Like, this is not okay. Like I didn't ask my dad for permission to move to Thailand. He didn't like it, but I did it. You know what I mean? Like that in me came out of like, this isn't right. Externally, it was hard because like, I am an American coming from this particular culture and context here in the US, stepping into this super Thai Burmese culture. And like, I'm not here to like bring in my ideas and my ideals and like plow over your culture, because I don't think that's helpful either. So I would say that for me, like, it was a really interesting dynamic internally and externally of, I want to show respect to this culture, but I don't agree with it. And I don't know what to do with that, because that's not why God's called me here. So I'm just going to keep doing what God's called me to, and like, just kind of sit in silence sometimes, because like, I don't know what else to do some of the days. Yeah. It's felt more internally in like an angsty way, and externally processed much differently.
But again, like, it helps inform our perspective as we step into these places with these women of like, okay, so it would be a huge push against like their culture and their husband as the leader in their home to try to like get them to break through to this point, like for the sake of just getting to this space. But how can we still challenge like steps of courage and step into the places that you feel like this is what the Lord's gifted me in, and this is what I want to step into. Like, how do you do that? And it just helps us in the discussion from the day to day at Braverly of like, okay, so maybe you're not going to get up on a stage and do XYZ, but like, what's something that you could do today? Like learning something new, stepping into like something that your initial reaction is, I don't know if I can do that. And like, no, here's how we break through and we pick courage over fear. Step into that. Like, try it, just try it. Even getting to a space of like, so culturally, it's actually really rude or disrespectful to ask a lot of questions of someone who's considered teacher, because it's in a way saying like they didn't teach you well enough because you have to ask questions about it. And so even trying to break down that mindset within a business context of like, we need you to ask us questions because that's how we know that you're learning and getting it. And it's taken a lot of time and it's still not perfect, you know. There's a lot of growing pains in that, but like small steps like that feel like huge victories to help people just embrace like, man, you have a mind that can process this. You don't have to just fit in this mold of like, this is just how it is. Like, challenge us in the right way, but like, let's have conversation. There's something I can learn from you, something you can learn from me. And that goes within your homes too. Like, each of us can learn from each other and like lead each other. Yeah.
Well, and that again goes perfectly with the title and theme of this podcast of, you know, the idea that we all need each other. And I think one of the reasons we've started having these conversations is because in the American context today, like when you're going into these situations that are so divisive, it's so easy to say, okay, well, if I internally, you know, just completely disagree with something like that, I'm going to show that externally in a very loud and sometimes, you know, not so great way. Like the divisions are so clear. But what I hear you both saying and what comes through clearly in the book is it's like, no, I mean, we can truly learn something from people who are on this whatever divide, you know, the other side of that. There's truly, you know, a positive you know, interaction that we can have. We don't have to just shut down. Could you just talk about that a little bit more? Because that weighs so heavily on me right now of there's so many divisions that it just seems like there's an impasse and we just can't get across them. And you both have done, like, literally have lived that out and done that. Like, what has that process been like?
I will say, so for me, coming from a space of like, I don't live here anymore. Like, I am an American. This is where I was raised, but I don't live here anymore. And to step into this space now and like to see such strong divisions, like I think there's always been divisions, but everything's heightened right now. And I think that alone like works against a lot of the conversations that could be had. Because everyone has a hill now that like it's their hill to die on. Like, okay, we've already given in on this or this or this, and I will not give in on this. Like, I won't even hear what anyone has to say about this. And like, I feel like everybody's kind of got their sticking point now. So it's been interesting to watch that dynamic. And I'm straying from the original question now, but just trying to understand like where people are coming from isn't something that seems to happen anymore. So I will say coming back into this culture now and trying to navigate that as someone who's been outside of it is hard. If anything, it helps me, like, I feel like I can come in with a little bit of a different perspective because it's very much, it happens where I am living now. Maybe not as loudly as it happens here, but just understanding like I won't get anywhere in Thailand if I can't come to the table and have conversation with people. And if I can't learn to like rely a little bit on their perspective and be able to share mine. And like, we come to a spot of like, we can even agree to disagree, you know, like if I can't operate in that way, I won't make it there. And that's something that's been lost here. People instead put up these walls of like, well, I just don't need you then.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like in a similar way, like just thinking about the original question of like, how do you navigate a culture where it's like, you got to ask permission from your dad or husband, like, and like, we didn't go in to change that. Like, and I think in a similar way in conversations that we have with anybody that we disagree with, like if I go into it like with this idea of like, I'm here to fight and change you, then like nothing's going to happen. Right. Like, and if anything, more divisiveness will happen. And just thinking about those parallels as well, like, man, like, yeah, I would love to see change in some areas in the same way that like in Thailand, like I'd love to see my friends there, like be able to have the same like liberties that I do here, like in that same way of like, you're a woman, but you don't have to go ask your dad for permission on this thing. Like you're 30. Stop. Right. Like I would love to see that happen there. I would love to see change happen even here and like in my neighborhood or wherever. But like, if I come to the table with humility and this idea that like, hey, little step by little step, little encouragement by little encouragement, I'm not here to like bulldoze you. We're not bulldozers in general. Like you probably could tell that. But like, I think that's a really helpful perspective to have as well. That's just like in any context going into it, thinking like, I'm here to win or change or whatever, like put my ideas on your ideas and call it good. Like it's not going to work, because it wouldn't work for the women at Braverly if we just were like, hey, but stick it to them. Like, don't ask them, just go for it. Like they're not going to stick around. That's not a safe place.
Right.
So I feel like it's some parallels there in that way too.
Absolutely.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but if you're loving this episode and you want to access any past episodes or show notes or more content, visit our website, www.transformation58.com/podcast. Okay, get back to the show.
I'd love to know, what are some things that the culture in Thailand has taught you just about yourself, God, the Christian life, faith, any of it? Like, what are some lessons that you've taken from living and learning from a different culture?
Yeah. So we're in the Western culture here that I don't remember what we are, power in something. I don't know. But in Thailand and in a lot of Asian cultures, it's honor shame is the balance there. And this was my first time like visiting / living then in an Asian context, and every country is different, but like in general, most tend to be honor shame. And just that balance, like there's this idea in honor shame culture that you avoid shame at all cost. Like even like I remember reading a book written by one of our missionary friends in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And she tells a story of like, she was asking for directions on the street and a guy like gave her the wrong directions because he clearly just didn't know, but he didn't want to look like he didn't know. So he just told her something just to avoid that shame. I'd be like, I don't know. Do you have Google Maps? Like you should maybe check that. So like, that's me, but like their culture is tends to be a lot more like avoiding shame. Like really showing honor and respect to those in positions of authority or like perceived like higher position than you, or perceived or real, like the king. So like there's a lot of honor also given to people. And I think that really mirrors a lot of like scripture and just the context that was written in. And so being immersed in an honor shame culture really opened up my eyes to just like, oh, like that's maybe what is happening in this particular story in the Bible, where like, to me, I read it from my Western perspective and it feels more like maybe a power dynamic. I don't know, like what, like fear, but like, I think there's a lot more honor and shame going on here. And I see the Father, like God taking that shame and like trying to restore honor to us. And like, that is really beautiful and something I hadn't really thought of before. I think too, for me, that whole idea of honor, like, there's this balance, right, with the Lord where he is very personal and very intimate, but he's also God. And there's a lot of like honor and respect in that I think I sometimes miss, whereas like God can sometimes, if I'm not careful, God and I can be like this, or maybe he's like this, but like, man, there's a lot of honor that sometimes I miss like giving to God because he's God. And like, being in that culture context, like it was just so obvious, whether it was always the most healthy balances of honor and shame. Like it was definitely an eye-opening thing where like, man, there's a lot of honor given there. Like do I give that same kind of honor to God and same kind of fear and reverence and like awe? So for me, just those like basic tenets of some like foundational course to the Thai culture really like has impacted the way I read scripture and understand a lot of that context.
I love how, I forget what chapter it was now, but you talked about the prodigal son and just like unpacked that story in the honor, shame, and like walked through that. And that was so eye-opening for me, because I was like, wow, like that son, there should have been so much shame heaped on him for what he chose to do, and how the father responded with honor.
Yeah.
So that was really, I loved how you wrote that and unpacked that. I totally hear what you're saying. That was really, really interesting. So what about you, Kristy? What have you?
Yeah. I love when you go first, because I'm like, yes, I feel all of
But
that.
you still have to answer. You can't just.
Yeah, no, but truly, even I will say too, just in general, being in Thailand and like being in a culture that does seem to mirror more so than our context here, what culturally it would have been like when the Bible was written. It changes so much of your perspective, so much of your understanding of like a simple story that I've heard my whole life, but like I never thought of it from this context. So it makes it come alive in a different way, which I would say has been so valuable for my relationship with the Lord. And just separate from just the culture in Thailand, like living overseas, it's created certainly a different kind of dependence in my life for I just need God. Like if he doesn't show up, this just doesn't happen. And I think it's really easy within this culture to lose that, because we're so self-sufficient in so many ways. And that's not a knock on Thailand. I don't want to make them sound weak in any way, because not at all. But we just get in our minds here of like, well, if I can't accomplish it myself, then it's not worth doing, you know? And so it's challenged me in those ways. I will say to what Kate said, like just there's a different sovereignty to God, like that I've come to encounter being in Thailand, and just, that honor that people give for those who are following the Lord. What's interesting about Thailand is like, it's less than 2% Christian.
Wow.
So it's an interesting place to just kind of live and serve. But to see those who are like chasing after him, just the sovereignty and honor that is given to him. And like, I forget sometimes about how important that side of it is. And like, you can get caught up in like, Jesus is my friend. And like, he wants to walk with me every day. And that's beautiful. And that's so true. But there is a clear difference between who he is and who I am. And the second I forget that, I forget, everything that's important. So just having those daily reminders is huge.
Yeah, it's almost like in the Western culture, we have this entitlement where we're like, God is kind of there to like give me things, and so you're right, that sovereignty and that awe, that's really good.
Yeah. So we got to wrap up here pretty soon. You guys got stuff to do. But Aaron, do you want to close us out?
Yeah. So we have a question that we always ask people on the podcast, and I'm going to get to that. But first I have what's probably the least important question anyone's going to ask here, but I would really like to know, there are a couple Thai food restaurants here in South Bend that I love, but I want to know, like, what's the difference between having actual Thai food? Like when you're in Thailand, like what are you ordering? And like, how is it completely different than Thai food we're eating here?
I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question, because
you haven't had Thai food here?
I don't typically get Thai food here, because the times that I've gotten it, it's just been so different. And I'm like, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be.
It's a bummer.
So I'm maybe not the right person to ask on that.
Being someone that regularly eats Thai food in America, but also only lived in Thailand for like a little less than a year, like 11 months or so. So I'm not the expert, but okay. In Thailand versus here, it's a lot spicier in Thailand.
I wondered if that was going to be the answer.
Yeah. Spice is like nothing here.
Yeah.
Versus in Thailand, I'm like actually piling on chili here, but there I'm like, please no. Yeah. That's a really big thing. I will say, like, before I lived in Thailand, I thought like pad Thai and like the like fried noodles and all that, awesome. But like, there's just a whole other world of flavors there. Like my favorite in Thailand is just simply like pork, like grilled pork.
Isan
And yeah, it's Isan food. It's northern food. It's like grilled pork and sticky rice. And there's like a super spicy sauce you dip it into. You just eat it with your hands because that's normal. There's also this dish called khao soi, and it is the most amazing thing. And I have never found it in the States at a restaurant that's actually good. I live now in a neighborhood that's mostly people from Burma, and then some people from Thailand. So when I go to homes, sometimes I get pretty good khao soi. So I guess if you can't go to Thailand, just come up to Chicago and I'll take you some home visits. You'll get some really good almost Thai food.
Okay, well, the question we always ask people, because I just think it's a great kind of insight into where you're at right now and just kind of what's kind of catching your fancy. What's something that's just fascinating you right now? And this could be, anything, a work of art, just something random in your day. But what is, if you could pick one thing that's just really fascinating you right now, what would that be?
Why the parking situation in Chicago just gets worse and worse every day. No,
that is fascinating.
It is.
It is.
Kind of a parking lot. No, honestly, for me, this might be like more serious than what you want, but what's really fascinating to me right now. So like I said, I'm in like working with refugees and immigrants. So even today, Kristy and I did some home visits and we went to 2 different cultures, 2 different like people from different countries, backgrounds, languages, all that. And I'm just like always so fascinated by this neighborhood and by how to, like, I feel like I'm constantly learning how to work cross-cultural in the span of like 30 minutes because I'm like interacting with somebody from Sudan in one moment and the next moment someone from Burma. And the next moment, someone from Burma, but a different tribe in Burma. So it's just like really fascinating to me, like how to navigate this space. But it's always fun. It is never dull in this neighborhood.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Okay, so the more lighthearted answer for me would be I'm just fascinated by the fact that like I can understand every conversation that's happening now. I'm like fascinated / overwhelmed. Because it's just so loud here all the time because I'm like, I actually know what everyone is saying. That's weird. The less lighthearted that's been like maybe the harder adjustment for me being back is just how things look and feel now. I've been away for 3 years. I've missed quite a lot of shifts that have happened in America. And I think people assume that because I am American, even though I'm living abroad, like I'm up to date on everything that's happening here. And I'm just not because I want to be uninformed or like it's an intentional, like just, I don't want to hear any of it. But like the realities that I live in now, like there's very different struggles and crises in front of my face all the time. So I feel very removed from this culture that was always home to me. So it's been fascinating to step back in and like, I've never felt like such a foreigner in a place that was home.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's deep. I wish we could keep unpacking all of what you
Yeah, this has been great.
A lot.
Oh man.
See you next week.
Yeah.
We'll have to have a part 2.
I was going to say, Kristy,
Dan, and we'll just keep going.
Yeah. How's your internet service in Thailand, Kristy? We could do another episode. That'd be great.
Pretty good sometimes. I don't know.
So the follow-up question there is, what's the hour difference?
Right now from Indiana, it's 11.
Okay,
Chicago 12.
Yeah, the scheduling for that would be really fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fun to work together. It's really fun to schedule meetings with Kristy.
Hey, I'll be up with my 1-year-old. Like, it's all good.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh man, you guys, this has been really fun. It's fun to see you guys laughing together. I know that you guys just kind of feed off each other when you're together. So thankful that you've had this time to be together here in the States, and thankful for the work that you've done with the book.
Absolutely.
Also what you're doing at Bravery and at Devon Oasis. You guys are just doing amazing things, and we're honored to have the chance to talk to you. And I'm excited to put this out into the world and let other people be encouraged by it. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, I echo that.